I'm Stephen Metcalf, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest Colbert is Canceled edition. It's Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. On today's show, the filmmaker Ari Aster returns with a darker-than-dark Eddington. It stars Joaquin Phoenix as a New Mexico sheriff at the center of a community coming apart at the seams during the summer of 2020, the summer of the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and Me Too. It also stars Pedro, Pascal, and Emma Stone. And then Billy Joel is one of the biggest-selling pop acts of all time. A new 5-hour doc on HBO explores the career and inner torments of the man behind all that pugilistic fronting and 150 million units sold. And finally, in a surprise move, CBS has canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert to help sort out the significance of this. Was it punitive? Was it purely economics? As well as the fate of late night in general. We are joined by James Poniewozik, the chief TV critic of the New York Times. Delighted to speak with him. But first, also delighted to speak with Sam Adams, Slate writer and senior editor. Sam, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is like a third timer face-to-face?
I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice run we're on.
There's a lot of beauty in this room.
Oh, fuck off. And then,
a little Billy Joelian sincerity from Sam.
And Dana Stevens, of course, the film critic for Slate.
Hello, Steve.
Hey, we have some juicy stuff to get to, so shall we?
Let's do it.
Are you ready to dairy-free your mind? This summer, melt away your dairy-free expectations with So Delicious dairy-free frozen desserts. Enjoy mind-blowing flavors like salted caramel cluster, chocolate cookies and cream, cookie dough, and more. For over 35 years, So Delicious has been cranking up the flavor with show-stopping products that are 100% dairy-free, certified vegan by Vegan Action, and are so unbelievably creamy, your taste buds will do a double take. Dairy-free your mind. Visit SoDeliciousDairyFree.com.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. From improving emergency response times to protecting against cyber attacks, local, state, and federal governments are innovating with Google AI. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
The director, Ari Aster, made two very well-received and I think quite lucrative horror movies, especially maybe the first one, Hereditary, followed by Midsommar, at least a moderate hit. Then he made what felt like a highly personal, idiosyncratic passion project called Beau is Afraid. It was a lurid Oedipal nightmare starring Joaquin Phoenix. Very, very like hallucinogenic film that did no business. The fourth movie, would it be a return to the genre picture or another wildly experimental ride? I think it's fair to say a little bit of both. Eddington stars Joaquin Phoenix as Sheriff Joe Cross. He's the sheriff in a dusty, underpopulated county in New Mexico. Just as the pandemic is getting into fuller swing and Cross is increasingly vocal anti-masker. And this brings his simmering, long-standing feud with the town's mayor to a boil. That's Ted Garcia, played by Pedro Pascal. He's depicted as something of a liberal smoothie with a big plan to revive the depressed area with high-tech AI development. When Sheriff Joe, Joaquin Phoenix, decides to run for mayor against the backdrop of the summer of protests and ambient paranoia and social media filling the void left by face-to-face interactions, it's fair to say mayhem ensues. In the clip we're about to hear, we will hear Pascal and Phoenix, the smoothie mayor and the disaffected sheriff, facing off. Let's have a listen.
Can we just talk? Can just the two of us?
We are.
Okay. So maybe I just talk to your video. Ask where all your deputies went.
Okay, well, why don't I just ask your governor about her little catch and release policy, okay? Because if it wasn't for that, maybe I could hold on to my deputies and the people we arrest.
I know one of them was fired for excessive force and another one was forced to quit by a YouTube First Amendment auditor.
Okay, yes, that is the same auditor that drove away your work.
Your undersheriff died of a fentanyl overdose.
From handling fentanyl.
And your captain and your chief deputy took jobs in Rio Rancho.
That was devastating.
You can't keep your own office going, but you're going to run mine. Leave your mess here and start a whole new one.
Dana, let me start with you. Is it fair to say it's somewhat hard to summarize or characterize this film quickly? It is about instability. It is itself from a genre and character standpoint, a relatively unstable set of compounds. Where does one even begin with a film like this? I suppose the simplest place is, what did you make of the experience of watching it?
I mean, I think even those who love Eddington, of which I don't count myself, but I'm really glad we're talking about it. I think even those who love it would admit that it is a movie that functions by abrasiveness. It wants the viewer to feel alienated, anxious, to be sort of relentlessly bludgeoned by exchanges like the one we just heard, and then later things get really violent, and basically every conversation in this movie is either a confrontation or someone attempting to swindle someone else or something of a very aggro nature. And it's 2.5 hours long, but all of that adds up to an experience that leaves you very nerve jangly, which is, I guess, appropriate for a movie about the summer of 2020. So I guess the question becomes, as was also the case with Beau is Afraid and arguably all of Ari Aster's movies, is experientially being dragged through a series of unpleasant moments the same thing as, identifying with characters in a drama and actually sort of losing oneself in a fictional experience? And both for Beau is Afraid and for this movie, that answer was completely no. And I'm not talking about the characters being unlikable, which they pretty much all are, but of the movie actually creating dramatic interest of some sort. I don't think that this movie ever managed to do that. Everyone continued to feel like an idea. They might have represented a lot of different conflicting ideas, and it may have been deliberately murky. Like, I'm not saying that this movie's symbology is obvious. It's really, really not, as I'm sure Sam will get to in talking about it. But, I mean, I think I am with David Rooney of The Hollywood Reporter, the critic, who's, I think the headline to his review was something like, absurdism is not the same thing as incoherence. I think incoherence was, to me, what dominated in this movie. That said, it has a lot of good ideas floating around in the mix. The idea of setting a movie at this time and turning it into this kind of Western is one that has great promise. And there were lots of moments in the movie where I thought, that detail is smart. That plot development is cool. This is going in an interesting direction. But to me, especially when we get to the last half hour, when, as Sam writes in Slate about the movie, when the viewer is supposed to be as confused about what's true and false and real and not as the characters are, I had just completely checked out as a viewer and was just waiting for it to be over.
I have to be frank. I'm amazed you got to the last half hour still undecided on that issue. I mean, Sam, let's begin with, I think, what's fair to say, and Dana touches on it beautifully as always, but it's like incredibly crowded film.
Yeah.
It's filled with ideas that maybe overwhelm or dwarf the people or characters in the film in some sense. And there does seem to be, if I'm remembering the phrase correctly, what Brecht, the German playwright, called alienation affect. Is that it? Or alienation effect, maybe, where you actually want very actively to disrupt an audience's ability in any traditional sense to connect with, much less have an Aristotelian cathartic relationship with characters in a play. It's certainly all over this movie. I mean, you are meant to be overwhelmed, confused, alienated. That added up to something meaningful to you, and I'm dying to hear how that happens.
I'll do my best. I will say it is interesting to hear you, I think you did a very good job of sort of summarizing the movie at the top of this segment, but it was, as you were going through that, I was just like, oh, I guess that is what happens in this movie, because that's so not the experience of watching it, going through that. So I did sort of a deep dive for Slate into Ari Aster's movies when the last one, Beau is Afraid, came out. And the idea I sort of settled on at that point is that he makes movies about conspiracy theorists who are proven right. He makes movies about characters who believe there's something wrong with the world, that there's some sinister force underneath everything manipulating them. And they turn out to be right. It's a cult, or it's your mom, or whoever it is. What happens in Eddington is that I think every character in this movie kind of believes that they're a lead in an Ari Aster movie. They all think there's a conspiracy going on that they are either actively promulgating or in the process of delivering, and they cannot, of course, all be right. But what I think he does is he kind of forces you as the viewer into the position of being kind of this crazy conspiracy theorist disappearing down an internet rabbit hole, which is what a lot of us, even those who are maybe not ordinarily so inclined, were doing in May of 2020. We were kind of, stuck inside a lot of the day, not able to see our friends or loved ones. We were constantly afraid of this virus, of the people around us. Even the smartest people in the world didn't seem to really know what was going on. And they were telling us one thing one day and one thing the next.
So were the dumbest people in the world.
People were like disinfecting their groceries and stuff. Like, it was just insane. And I think this movie, Dana used the phrase, I wrote this down, you experientially being dragged through a series of unpleasant moments. And I think that is an accurate description of the film. And it is also, to my mind, kind of an accurate description of May of 2020. So I think the movie kind of plunges us back into that moment, whether or not we particularly want to go there. I think, it is very abrasive in that sense, but it does. I have the benefit of having watched it initially when it premiered at Cannes in May. So I've had a couple months to think about it. I've gotten to see it twice, and it does hang together even, I think, better than it presents itself as doing. Like, it kind of wants you to feel like things just blow up at the end and don't make any sense, and you're totally kind of submerged into the COVID-addled brain of Joe Cross, Joaquin Phoenix's character, who ends up kind of being its protagonist by default. It does, hang together, but in order to do that, you have to kind of dive deep into it and pick up on these tiny little details that are almost impossible to see the first time through. So it turns you into a nut. And then you end up ranting like me, or writing 2,500 words on the ending, as I did yesterday, trying to explain to people what it's really about.
I really want to go back to that, to where you've left it, because I want you to give the best, strongest case that this is a coherent vision about an incoherent world, and not just an incoherent movie suffering from the mimetic fallacy of being the thing it is intending to diagnose or understand. I will just describe my experience of the movie. So I didn't have a professional obligation to see this. I would have walked out after 15 minutes. And among the many, many problems I have with it is none of the characters are fleshed out as real people at all. There's precisely nothing cogent about their motivations or their presentation. I've become really distrustful about movies in which no character has a sense of humor about themselves, right? What that does is immediately signs all powers of knowledge to the author of the thing, the movie or the TV show or the novel or whatever. No character is conscious, all characters are conscious, but none of them are self-conscious in a way that allows them to be ironic or perceptive about their own situation. I find that it just enormously condescending. Every being in this entire movie is subordinated to the supposed vision of Ari Aster. I just find that tremendously insulting. There's room for a movie like this. We suffer in this country from tremendous ability to forget. I mean, the amnesia. In part, now we're living in such a chock-a-block event-filled reality that just new horrors displace the old ones so much that you sort of forget them. And it's astonishing to think, I mean, Sam, you put your finger on it. I often mime picking up a frozen meat pack, cellophane meat pack, and then in the other hand, a disinfectant spray bottle, and going tss, 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 on my ground chuck and wiping it clean, or not breathing in my mail, like leaving my mail out on my porch for 3 days before I touched it. Like, it was an insane time, and revisiting it with perspective would be great. I think he suffers from something that was totally out of his control, which is that Trump won. And now we're into this sort of cascading series of ever more horrible realities. And I don't know that anybody in their right mind wants to go back and revisit pandemic. But I had a second problem that I'd be curious to hear you guys speak to. I am increasingly troubled by Joaquin Phoenix as an actor. I'm describing an impression, not a diagnosis, and I do not mean to be glib, but he seems to be me to be a not well human being. And he's riding the line between a gifted and visionary artist who's using some version of the method to take the chaos that's inside him mentally and use it to portray the Joker or the protagonist of Her, and obviously Beau in Beau is Afraid, and now this movie. But he's so close to me to being a person, again, this is a perception, on the verge of a kind of breakdown. It's becoming too upsetting to watch him on screen for me, just personally. I'm just curious what your reaction is to that. Am I having is this too highly personal a reaction to what Joaquin Phoenix is doing, or does it ring at all true to you?
I mean, I might have seen something like that a few years ago. I remember when he made, was it called I'm Not Here? That movie where he essentially enacted his own mental breakdown with Ben Affleck.
Casey Affleck.
Casey Affleck, right. I think I would take that down a slightly different path where I would say, I'm not worried about Joaquin Phoenix. I think that he's a mentally healthy man who loves his girlfriend, Rooney Mara, and is having a great career and is having a fine life.
Fair enough, yeah.
I do think that directors have started too much to typecast him as this kind of mentally crumbling person, and that it's not allowing him to explore other parts of his actorly persona. As Amy Nicholson put it in her review of Eddington, he's always finding new wrinkles in his sad sack. You know, he's still good in this movie. He's still doing the thing that Joaquin Phoenix can do very well, but we've seen him do it many times. So for me, that doesn't so much go down, thankfully, down the road of personally worrying about him as just wishing that he would get more chances to do different things.
The thing that Phoenix is doing in this movie that I do find intriguing is his voice never really fully emerges from his own throat. And he's portraying this as sheriff as this man who quintessentially can't vocalize and therefore structure his own reality fully. To make a movie with him looking, to me, sort of surprisingly like an older Dennis Hopper, a Western where he's the sheriff, and yet he himself is the void at the center of the thing. Like there's an anti-heroic, like aggressively anti-heroic inability of this person to sort of draw himself out of his own being, control his circumstances, and act. I'm just curious to hear you now summarize your conclusion, having seen it twice, about why at some level this movie gets at an important truth.
You know, for me, it is important both as kind of a document of that, as you know, and I say like a sort of a psychological document of that time. Like, this is not a realist portrait of like what it was like in May of 2020, but it is, Ari has described it as a movie about sort of what it felt like to him specifically. And I think it does capture that. And I think it gets at just sort of the conspiratorial mindset, which is such a fundamental part of the American DNA, certainly in the last, 50, 60 years, but arguably even going farther back than that. And what the internet especially has done to that, how everybody can disappear down their own rabbit hole. It's not a coincidence or an accident that this movie is kind of framed by the presence or the possible presence of this AI data center that they want to build in this kind of hallucination machine that they want to put in the middle of the desert and feed all this water and power that should be going to the people. And I think it basically kind of feeds you. It's entirely made by people, but it feeds you that kind of like hallucination. I certainly understand like people. I think an entirely healthy response to not want to sit through that, especially for 2.5 hours. But I mean, I find myself liking his movies more the more abrasive they become, which is maybe something for me and my therapist to work through. But I think there is something like important in the confrontation here that is not just kind of a thumb in the eye, although it may also be that.
I mean, I will say something that I think the film does well, and the only time that it made me laugh, really, none of the dialogue or things that were sort of intended to be funny really worked in that way, but its use of social media and the way it always showed what was coming up, like the algorithmic suggestions on the side. I can see, Sam, why seeing it a second time would be interesting in that sense, because I would like to have a series of screenshots from all the moments that somebody is looking at TikTok or YouTube or social media, and usually just to the side or just below what they're looking at is some completely outlandish allegation, or, the black screen phenomenon of the Black Lives Matter is sort of poked fun at. There's a lot of specific humor targeted at the self-aggrandizing use of social media.
All right. Well, the movie is Eddington. We're curiously ambivalent about it, I guess, on the panel. The only way to understand it is to see it, but go forewarned.
All right, well, summer is now in full swing, and it's a good season to refresh your closet while not wasting money on pieces you'll only wear for one season. For timeless, elevated classics that feel luxurious, check out Quince. Steve, whenever we have a Quince ad, I always turn to you. A nation turns its lonely eyes to Steve Metcalf, perhaps the biggest Quince fan, certainly the biggest Quince fan on this podcast, although I'm quite a fan of their products too. But is that lovely linen shirt you're wearing right now something from Quince?
Oh, thank you for pointing that out, Dana. Yes, in fact, it is totally unpreplanned. It wouldn't have to be planned because over the course of the summer, especially a sweaty, humid, hot summer, spent in New York City, I like wearing breathable fabrics, none more breathable or elegant than linen. I like its wrinkly, informal aspect. Also, these 100% European linen drawstring beach pants, I knew that they were going to make an absolutely category-killing version of these. They're often incredibly expensive. They are not if you get them from Quince. Again, never taken a freebie, never will, don't want one. This is just sincerely, I love what they do and what they make.
Best of all, their European linen tops start at around $30. They also have a lot of silk products. I've never worn their linen, actually, but I love their silk, and lots of other versatile warm weather pieces that you'll reach for again and again. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/culture for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/culture to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culture. It's the moment in the podcast where we talk about the business, and our only item this week is to let listeners know about today's Slate Plus segment. This week, we're going to be talking about location sharing. We decided, because of a couple articles that have appeared, but also just because it was something we all wanted to get into, what it means to track somebody else on their phone. Who do you track? Who tracks you? What does that mean? Do you feel surveilled, or do you feel seen when you're tracked via location sharing? If you're a Slate Plus member, you'll hear that discussion in a separate segment in your feed. If you're not a Slate Plus member, here's how you can become one. Go to slate.com/cultureplus and sign up. That way you can get ad-free podcasts, you can get bonus segments like the one I just described, and of course, you will get unlimited access to the writing and the podcasting on slate.com. When you're a member, you're really helping to keep the magazine afloat and keeping the show going. So please, if you haven't already, sign up today at slate.com/cultureplus. Once again, that's slate.com/cultureplus. All right, back to the show.
Tell me what year you were in 7th grade, and I'll tell you who you are pop consciousness-wise, especially vis-a-vis music. I was in 7th grade in 1977, the year The Stranger vaulted Billy Joel to superstardom. I loved him in 7th grade. I loved that record. I deeply connected to it. In 8th grade, I discovered Bruce, and I never looked back. I've spent the decade since, more or less, not even thinking about Billy Joel, but if I do, it's to casually revile him. Until now, Billy Joel, And So It Goes, is the new 5-hour doc on HBO, co-directed by Susan Lacey and Jessica Levin. It follows a remarkable life and career from starting early on. He was an angry young man from Oyster Bay, Long Island, from Hicksville specifically. The name of his town just kind of bites at him. He sees the significance of being from Hicksville. But he had a musical ear to die for and a chip on his shoulder a mile wide. He became a young recording artist who was unsure of himself as a songwriter, maybe. He had so much musical talent. And what mix of Elvis, Tin Pan Alley, the American Songbook, Gershwin, the Beatles should he be? As we amply see, he was an indefatigably rowdy performer early on and a very, very gifted melodist. I actually think this is true. He's earwormy on a par with Paul McCartney. He finally made a signature song in Piano Man, about which we'll have more to say, I'm sure, but success was elusive until The Stranger blew open his career, after which he never looked back. He's one of the biggest selling music acts of all time. But a question I think it's fair to say has dogged him every step of the way. Billy Joel, punchline, or national treasure? I think people will refine their opinion about this watching the documentary. They may come out on one or the other, but they'll know a lot more about the torment behind this musician. In the clip we're about to hear, he discusses his life in relation to his art.
The most original thing I've ever done in my life is screw up. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I once asked a truly great chef how he got to be so good. He said, it's all in the recovery, how you correct your mistakes. I think there's a lot of hard-won wisdom that comes with that. Everything I've done and everything I've lived through has somehow found its way into my music.
Sam, it strikes me, having seen now the first 2 hours of this, I'm very eager to see the rest of it, that somehow is doing a lot of work. It's somehow made its way into my music. It's interesting. I want to hear everyone has a history with Billy Joel, right? Even if it's hating We Didn't Start the Fire. Curious to hear what yours is and how it got revised watching this.
Right, as interesting as you were sort of doing the intro for this, where it took me to is like, tell me who Billy Joel was when you were in seventh grade, and I'll tell you what your relationship to Billy Joel is. Because when I sort of became conscious of Billy Joel is probably maybe in the We Didn't Start the Fire era. So he was already like fully established as big as pop stars get.
Yeah.
I liked his songs, sort of before I started thinking about music critically. And then once I started reading the Rolling Stone album guide and whatever, I came to understand that he was bad and I was not supposed to like him. And I think I had sort of stuck with that. But then a really interesting phenomenon of the last several years is finding young people like Olivia Rodrigo, who wrote Billy Joel into one of her songs, Deja Vu, which is about like your ex-boyfriend kind of teaching all the stuff that you taught him to his new girlfriend. And he's like, oh, Billy Joel is like the cool, I bet she knows Billy Joel because you told her about, and it's like, oh, Billy Joel is like the cool person that you like, the little secret that you passed on to your boyfriend, like the cool neighborhood coffee shop that nobody knew about. And now they go there together. And that is such a bizarre turn. So I've had to readjust my thinking somewhat, or I guess I'm in the process of doing that. I do think 4.5 hours, which is the entire length of this 2-part documentary, is frankly longer, more thought than I want to put into Billy Joel. I think the 90-minute Hit Parade episode that Chris Melanphy did is more to the point. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff about his life, some of which is in the lyrics, some of which is not. The second part, which will premiere on HBO this Friday, opens with a sort of recitation of his father's, or I guess mostly his grandfather's childhood in Germany when they owned a textile factory in Nuremberg and were chased out of the city by the Nazis. That factory was then used to like manufacture concentration camp uniforms, which goes to explain like a lot of the sort of abusive behavior from his father that he talks about in the first part of the movie. So that's all very interesting, sort of stuff I didn't know. Inevitably, what you watch this documentary, and my feeling about music documentaries, that even at their worst, you kind of get to sit in one place and listen to a bunch of pretty good music for a couple hours, or in this case, a couple times a couple, and all the songs from An Italian Restaurant and The Stranger and on are playing this. And I know all the words. I'm tempted to sing along and whatever. So he writes, he has the melodies and everything else. But I do kind of come away wondering if, and maybe one of the reasons critics, have not always been so kind to him is these are good songs that I think in some ways maybe don't bear that much thinking about. I sort of happy to have them on in the background, but I don't know that I want to, will be thinking about Billy Joel for the rest of the week.
You're not going to Lyric Genius to investigate scenes from An Italian Restaurant.
No. And even, the stuff in this movie that you find out that's autobiographical, like in Big Shot, where he's like, oh, we're so impressed with your Halston dress and the people that you knew at Elaine's. And there's just like, oh, that was my wife and manager at the time who had a Halston dress and liked to hang out at Elaine's. And so even the stuff that you find out has deeper meaning is just a kind of a transliteration of like what was going on in his life at the time.
But I was fascinated by that angle. I mean, these songs that, you do sort of think of them as the song that's on in the coffee shop, right? And they're so directly autobiographical, and I didn't know anything about his life. So, for example, the song Vienna, which apparently has had this big afterlife and is one of the most requested songs at his live shows, though it was not a hit.
You go back to The Stranger, that was a song that, forget it had no radio presence. We were not associated with that record at all. Now has 800 million listens on Spotify, by far the most listened to song off of an album that has Moving Out and Just the Way You Are. And I mean, it's just astonishing.
So, so the story behind that song is so directly autobiographical that he made this trip to Vienna, I guess, in his early 40s to investigate some of his father's past and his Jewish family from Europe. And that made me like the song much more. I'm really glad I watched this documentary, although I was furious the whole time at how insanely overlong, and not just overlong, but really poorly paced it is. not that everything has to be strictly chronological, but it's about 40 minutes into the first 2.5-hour long chunk that you learn about his childhood. And then, unbelievably, it's about 10 minutes into the second nearly 2.5-hour long chunk that you learn about that trip to Vienna and his deeper past. I mean, there could have been a way to pace that so that, you sort of, the discoveries that he made in his own life and the songs he wrote about them are shown sort of at the same time by the documentary. But this really doesn't hit it. And it just ended up feeling massively, massively padded.
And I think it's illustrative of what this documentary is, that the sequence with, about his grandfather's childhood, or his grandfather's life in Nazi Germany is, which is so fascinating. I think some of the most, certainly for me, revelatory stuff in the movie is followed shortly thereafter by a segment which is just about like how all the critics who said bad things about Billy Joel records were dumb assholes and all their names have been forgotten by history. And John Mellencamp turns up to be like, yeah, well, where are they now? And it's just like, it can't kind of stick. It can't take the high road like Billy Joel himself, who has sort of he's ripped up reviews on stage. He's famously been impatient with anybody who's had bad things to say about his music. And it can't just like, he won, he sells out 30 nights at Madison Square Garden. Like, he won. There's no need to go back and worry about what somebody said in the LA Times in 1978, but he's still angry about it.
Yeah, it really, really struck me watching this how much one of the core emotions expressed by Billy Joel songs is resentment. I don't think I had really realized that before. I mean, obviously songs like Big Shot or Moving Out are sort of like, fuck you, the man, right? That's a very Billy Joel sentiment. But even his slower ballads, Piano Man, is very much about people who are resentful about their lives, and the piano man himself resenting that he's sitting there in the piano bar playing. And we all have these petty resentments, so those songs express something elementally human, but there really is a very frequent return to that particular aspect.
Absolutely. He used to famously, I think, every live show, he ended with, and remember, don't take any shit from anyone. Everyone. He may still do it. I'm not sure, but it was like his signature tagline. I mean, you shouldn't take shit from people, but still, I mean, so I loved the 2 hours that I saw. I would have watched, kept going, but the digital screener was all fakaked, and so I couldn't. To me, part one, in addition to being the story, so I agree that the chronology of it is very weird. I think what they were doing, and I don't agree with it, but I understand it, which is, let's just show you the career and get you hooked. Like tell you the arc of the sheer number of failures and false starts, which are fascinating, and then get you to the moment of the stranger, I guess it is, where he finally breaks through and is a superstar. And then we're going to go back. Now that you're hooked, we're going to tell you how complex this is. So to me, there are some big revelations in this. First of all, I don't know that he's ever really opened up about two, not one, but two totally, totally committed suicide attempts, actual attempts to kill yourself unequivocally. Like when he was around 20, I believe, he really struggled with depression and a crushing sense of failure. It then, I think, goes into why, in some sense, his father inflicted a very specific set of, generalized wounds of being abusive and then absent, which is a terrible, terrible combination. To have been very present as a disciplinarian and a kind of, wretched superego in a household, and then to withdraw from it when the son, or daughter or child is still quite young, just leaving that ghost in that household forever. So he has that horrible superego that his father implanted in him. And the second thing I would say about the documentary is, I think part one is an epic story of his relationship with his first wife. That to me is utterly compelling. She's a supremely intelligent, self-possessed, anchoring woman who's way more than a muse. She's that too. He was really in love with her. All of those love songs early on are about her and the astonishing depth of feeling they had between one another. But it is really obvious they were lovers. They were absolutely best friends. They were confidants. And the biggest reason his career turned around after all these false starts and really getting screwed by everybody in the music business was she became his manager. And her, in the present tense, she's on camera now talking about the relationship, and him in the present tense talking about the relationship. You really feel the intensity and depth of that. And he doesn't quite come out and say it. She almost says it, but not in a self-centered way. He just would not have been Billy Joel without her. That to me was quite a story.
Joel himself doesn't seem to have that much regret or feeling about it, or certainly that he's willing to share with the camera. Maybe it all goes into his songs. But he is weirdly, even as he's talking about this tremendous, about suicide attempts and a history of alcoholism and failed marriages and managers who stole all his money and critics that he's mad at, he's very clinical about it in a way.
Yeah, very detached. All right, we got to go around the panel, and I believe he only wrote, and I really mean this sincerely, I believe he only really wrote one truly, truly great song, like infallible and will never, ever die, and his recording of it is definitive.
I know what you're going to say.
New York State of Mind.
Mm-hmm.
New York State of Mind is just, he was in California, alienated, not fitting in with the Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter world. His career was foundering upon founding. It was just a disaster. And he literally arrives, and according to him, arrives in his house back in New York, deciding to move back there. And he just blows past his wife and goes up to the piano and writes it in 10 minutes. And it's that song. It's so, I get, it's like, I get it's Ray Charles. I get that it's, sort of frankly derivative in some sense. I do not care. That is a sincere, a musical expression as the man was capable of. And that song, to me, just every time really, really, really affects me.
I know what I'm needing, and I don't want to waste more time. I'm in a New York state of mind.
Dana, I'm curious. We haven't really heard your history about Billy Joel.
That's true. My 7th grade story. I mean, he was so ambient at that time that although it was a couple years after The Stranger broke that I was in my own record buying era, I certainly feel like I knew every word of that album, and we had it in the house. I totally remember the LP cover being around, probably because my older brother had it. I don't know. I mean, he's one of those artists that I never thought to analyze because he's so omnipresent. He's so schmaltzy and so cringe. But in a way, that's his charm as well, and I think there are other songs of his that will survive, although maybe only he can sing some of them. You're right that New York State of Mind, he kind of sings the ultimate version, but there's a long montage in the first half of this showing different people covering his most covered songs. Yeah. And, Tony Bennett has sung it, and I mean, anybody who sings standards has probably tackled New York State of Mind. But I think Piano Man will live on in the same way, even though it is sort of the height of Billy Joel cringe, and it very much is that self-pitying, resentful tone that I was talking about. It's like Hotel California. Like, it's a terrible song, but everyone knows it, and it will never go away. It's like the styrofoam pellet of music making.
It is. It's a forever chemical.
He says, son, can you play me a memory? I'm not really sure how it goes, but it's sad and it's sweet, and I knew it complete when I wore a younger man's clothes.
One thing I will say, Sam, is though, and this is one of those moments that to me is like a drug, they get a little bit of what's unique about it musically, which is not just that he's the first guy that anyone can recall who strapped a harmonica on, like a little harmonica necklace, and played piano and harmonica at the same time. It's a waltz, and that waltz quality, the fact that it's in 3/4 time, which you don't necessarily notice 6/8 actually, you don't notice right at first, but it gives it the sea chanty quality. And the point that they make about it, whether you love it or hate it, is if it comes on a jukebox and you're in a public place, the room's gonna sing.
Right. I think and mentally just went right to Scenes from an Italian Restaurant for the same reason you went to Piano Man, Dana, which is that it's possibly a great song that is not a good song.
Yeah.
Just, I think all the schmaltz, all the sort of reductive but honed storytelling. There's something a little pat, but also really kind of evocative.
Things are okay with me these days. Got a good job, I got a good office, I got a new wife, got a new life, and the family is fine. Oh, lost touch.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of Billy Joel at his essence. Evocative, inexcusable, inescapable.
Brilliant. And so it goes as the 4.5-5 hour documentary on HBO now about Billy Joel. Check it out.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Everyone can use a little help to shape the direction of their lives. From fitness routines to mental resilience, or navigating personal goals to tackling burnout. That's what the Life Kit podcast from NPR is here to do. If you're looking to move with more intention, or just need thoughtful guidance on living better, Life Kit delivers strategies to help you make meaningful, sustainable change. Life Kit offers real stories, relevant insights, and clear takeaways to help you meet those large and small decision-making moments with confidence and clarity. Listen to Life Kit to hear thoughtful conversations that unpack the emotional and practical side of personal wellness, along with actionable guidance you can actually use. No fluff, no judgment. Life Kit isn't just another podcast about self-improvement. It's about understanding how to live a little better, starting now. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.
Stephen Colbert is as big a talent to ever occupy the host seat on a late-night show. Arguably, he's wittier and more likable than Carson. He's sharper and more deft on his feet than Letterman. This is my opinion, I suppose. But in addition to which, he's a profoundly serious and moral and centered human being, at least as show business can tolerate. His improbable rise from Daily Show sidekick doing squirm comedy to a Bill O'Reilly, Hannity, Mankay satirist to Late Show host has been remarkable to watch. But as big a talent and a heart as he is, he's trapped in a business model suffering badly from diminished returns. After calling out his parent company for apparently giving in to Trump in the form of a $16 million, call it what you will, some have characterized it as a bribe, to help with a merger that threatens to change forever the character of CBS, the Tiffany Network. His show was abruptly canceled by the Tiffany Network, raising questions. Is this an economic-driven decision? Is it Trumpist acquiescence of the most craven kind? Unsurprisingly, Stephen Colbert himself had some thoughts on that issue.
CBS, our network, CBS, who I want to reiterate, have always been great partners. Put out a statement saying very nice things about me and about the show, and thank you to them for that. They clarified that the cancellation was purely a financial decision. But how could it purely be a financial decision if The Late Show is #1 in ratings? A lot of folks... A lot of folks are asking that question, mainly my staff's parents and spouses. Well, over the weekend, somebody at CBS followed up their gracious press release with a gracious anonymous leak saying they pulled the plug on our show because of losses pegged between $40 million and $50 million a year. $40 million's a big number. I could see us losing $24 million, but where would Paramount have possibly spent the other $16 million? Oh, yeah.
Here to help us puzzle through this thorny subject is the terrific chief TV critic of the New York Times, James Poniewozik. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Love the show.
Start wherever you think is most appropriate here. I mean, this is so many different stories. It's a jug with many handles. Reach for one and get us going.
It is. And I mean, like, I think the thing that, people have been buzzing about since this happened is the question of why, right? Given not only the prominence of Colbert in the show, but the timing of it. And one of my favorite and most frustrating beliefs is that many things can be true at once, and that is probably the case here. We can talk about all the parts individually, but late night is in fact on a long and famous decline. And the decline in revenue has gotten sharper, lately. And yet, if CBS and the company's new ownership badly enough wanted to keep the Late Show around, they would have, as they have during the more recent years when it's been losing money, the way that NBC keeps the Tonight Show around. And then, of course, on top of this, there is the whole political aspect of it, which is not only the CBS Paramount bribe. I mean, those were Stephen Colbert's words, as you say, over the 60 Minutes lawsuit and the general environment of Paramount seeking a merger under an administration that has sought to use as many levers as possible to bring institutions to heel. This is not to say there, is necessarily some vast conspiracy. I don't have inside knowledge of that. But, part of the thing for me is just that after what happened with 60 Minutes, it is hard to just take CBS / Paramount's word at anything.
Right, especially because it was 3 days or something after Colbert had a segment on his show in which he correctly named the $16 million settlement that CBS is giving Trump as a bribe. Right, 3 days after that this announcement was made, which and the sheer I don't know, just on the level of strategic planning, like if CBS really did make this decision for these vague, financial reasons that they're talking about, they could have saved it and announced it 2 weeks later or something like that, right? I mean, it clearly to me seemed like it was a sop to the administration and a defensive act, an act of fear to announce at that moment.
Right. I mean, I bring to the world of business and English majors understanding of business, but my vague understanding is, at least if you're doing a merger with another company, you want to sort of plump up the value of your assets as much as you can, and whatever the Late Show is losing in revenue, Colbert is at least one of the faces of the network, if not the network, and cutting him loose before the deal is sealed just seems counterintuitive from that level.
Yeah, there are definitely reasons why a network might want to keep it around despite the bottom line. And that sort of, ambient effect on the brand is one thing. Another aspect of this is simply, there is a merger underway with Skydance. And the usual way of these things is that you are not necessarily going to just, wholesale make a huge change like this to one of your biggest properties without the okay of the company that you're merging with. I mean, that just, doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be done. Whether it's more a matter of, cleaning up the books for Skydance or eliminating a political problem or, just quote unquote, trying to kind of deliberalize CBS, or a combination of things where Colbert had just become more trouble than he was worth. It's not the sort of thing that you would do just before a merger if your merger partner were not on board.
To what extent is this a meaningful tea leaf about the direction that CBS might go? And we're talking not just about the network of Colbert and his predecessor, Letterman, but also the network that gave us Edward R. Murrow, who begat Walter Cronkite, who begat Dan Rather. I mean, there's sort of long lineage of journalistic seriousness, and of course, 60 Minutes. The character. Some people have speculated that the character of the network is going to substantially change well beyond the firing of Colbert. What do you?
I mean, I think once you sell out 60 Minutes the way they have, the character of the network has already changed.
It's already changed.
That's
very good point.
That horse is already out of the barn. But yeah, ultimately, whether it's business or politics or business facilitating politics or the two of them, just aligning. The fact is, it definitely sends the message that journalistic integrity, when we're talking about, 60 Minutes and CBS News, is now optional at CBS, which is, one of the most hallowed brands of independent television journalism in broadcast TV. And, that probably applies across the board. Again, nobody is entitled to have a late night show on a network. I don't want to, seem to claim that, but I also think that there is a value to artistic independence as well as journalistic independence. I think it is good for comedy and good for the soul of a country when comedians are free to make fun of people. And, even though we don't totally know what went on here, once there's the stink on this decision, of politics maybe influencing it, that's not a fantastic message to put out there.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it felt like a very dangerous incursion. I mean, it's funny that Colbert is known for his character that he used to play, right, where he was sort of the fake right-wing guy. This decision seems like a very scary incursion from the world of news into the world of entertainment, right? I mean, it's one thing, it's equally scary, but scary in a different way to be messing around with a venerable news program like 60 Minutes. But then when you step over into the late night talk show genre, it really does start to feel like a state media, the intervention of sort of state propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, because in part you have to wonder how this just affects other decisions down the line at other companies. The funny thing here is that if it weren't for the sort of political taint and questions around this decision, what we'd all be talking about is this as another example in the long ongoing death of the monoculture. Johnny Carson and David Letterman and all these shows, they used to be like Ed Sullivan or whatever, these giant, 20th century stages for bringing all of the elements of culture together under one tent, and big names from a lot of fields, and, people who you knew and people who your kids know, and, people who your grandparents knew, coming together. And, it's not a news story that kind of, monoculture has been going away. But once CBS eliminates its 11:30 show, that's what are they called in climate change? Like when glaciers are calving, that's just like a big piece of the iceberg falling into the ocean.
It's like an extinction level event.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if we can end on a note that is slightly more hopeful, I will say that I'm looking forward to the lame duck period of Stephen Colbert. He doesn't actually leave until, I think, May 2026. That's a pretty long time to get to continue to do a nightly show with a network that has sent a clear message about how much it values you. And I really hope that he goes to town and I don't know exactly what that would mean, but given the imagination of what Stephen Colbert has done in the past, he could go to town in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, he said last night, I think stealing the Arnold Schwarzenegger line, he said, "They made one mistake. They left me alive."
If you don't mind, like I can give you a couple positive notes to conclude on. Number one is that the monoculture wasn't always necessarily that great. Yes, it was this, sort of public square in which, TV and these big cultural institutions brought people together, but it also made things more homogeneous. It made things more pitched toward the middle of the road. One side product of the sort of fragmentation of culture is that you got more room for different kinds of voices and experimentation and doing different weird things. And honestly, the other half of this is that while it's probably bad for late show fans, it's not necessarily that bad for Stephen Colbert, who, frankly, I think was probably a better 11:30 host than I thought he would be, but I do think was more interesting on the Colbert Report and some other things that he's done than hosting this big tent show, increasingly pitched to, a hashtag resistance audience that, wanted to hear certain things. So, I'm excited for him to get a podcast or a newsletter or whatever people do next. And, really gets to turn loose his weirdness and his comedic/philosophical voice and, really delve into what interests him.
All right. Well, James Poniewozik, thank you so much for coming on the show. What a complete pleasure to finally have you on, and let's do it again.
It was a delight.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
After Zoomies at the dog park, it's time for Drive Up at Target. In goes a big bag of kibble and one squeaky chicken toy for the good boy. Drive Up that's ready when you are, only in the Target app. Just tap Target.
All right. Well, now is the moment in the podcast when we endorse Dana. What do you got?
My endorsement comes from our Billy Joel segment. So we talked a lot about various tracks of his, most of them either hits or, things that were sort of turning points in his career. And I really wanted to mention, but did not get to mention, one of the best, I think, uses of Billy Joel in a soundtrack, which is the 7th episode of the one existing season of Freaks and Geeks, which, as I've mentioned many times, is one of my favorite TV shows ever. And if you watch Freaks and Geeks, you know that the soundtracks tend to stick with one artist per episode. So there's like the Grateful Dead episode and there's sort of the country rock episode. Well, there's a Billy Joel episode, episode 7, that uses, I think it's just a few Billy Joel songs on the soundtrack, but they work so perfectly and they're all deep cuts. I'm looking now at the 3 Billy Joel songs that are used in this episode of Freaks and Geeks, and none of them are the big hits that we mentioned. They're all little, gentle, weird, deep cuts that work so beautifully in the context of the episode, which is all about, or half about, the subplot about the geeks, the younger kids in the show. The 3 boys meet a girl that they all have a crush on, and there's all these wonderful scenes of them sort of trying to win over this girl to join their friend group.
Oh, well, grab a free seat. Always room for another head on the chopping block.
And the 3 songs that go along with it are C'était Toi, a Billy Joel song with a French recurring lyric from Glass Houses, Rosalinda's Eyes, a song that I really like from 52nd Street, and Don't Ask Me Why, also from Glass Houses. And whenever I hear those songs, I always think of those moments in Freaks and Geeks of the 3 boys trying to impress the girl. It's a really sweet episode. And I think it would be nice to watch even out of context, but really, if you haven't seen Freaks and Geeks, just watch the whole damn season because it's perfect.
That's fabulous. Sam, what about you?
Well, okay, so on Saturday night, I went out to see the Mekons, who are...
yes.
Oh, yes. All right, very good. All right. Captive audience. Excellent. I went to go see the Mekons, who are this long-running folk punk band who are currently touring behind their 25th album, Horror, which is sort of a concept album about the history of British imperialism. If you're on the West Coast, you can still go see them live. I highly recommend that. But right now, I want to endorse their 1989 album, which is called The Mekons Rock and Roll. Rock and Roll was the band's first album on a major label. Also turned out to be their last. This was 2 years before the alternative era, and A&M simply did not know what to do with a bunch of sort of scraggly British art school students who wanted to both explore and disassemble the history of sort of American popular music. But it's almost 30 years later, and I think it still stands as one of their best albums. Great place to start in a pretty forbidding discography. And just a really sort of like raucous and kind of sardonic good time. The best place to start, I think, is fortunately with the first song, which is called Memphis, Egypt. And that song starts with a opening line that I would put up against any opening line really in the history of popular music, which is destroy your safe and happy lives before it is too late. This is an album made by anti-establishment anarchists who are kind of getting their shot at success, their first major label album, and kind of wondering, is this what we really want? It turns out, well, whether or not they wanted it, they didn't get it. But they have found success on their own terms. They long since given up music as a full-time pursuit. I think most of them have day jobs. I know one of their singers works as a paralegal in Chicago. But they have kept almost exactly the same lineup since like 1986. And they get together every year or two to tour or record an album or, presumably just hang out. And I think their music is still sort of vital and interesting. It has... We're going to bring up sea shanties twice in this episode. It has this great sort of mass sing-along quality to it while also making repeated references to Oliver Cromwell. So if that sounds like something you're into, I'm going to endorse the Mekons.
Oh, yeah.
Rock and Roll from 1989.
Great band, great record, great endorsement. Okay, I have two. Each one is very quick. Two endorsements this week. The one is a video went around after the news of Colbert's cancellation. Stephen Colbert is kind of the soul, to my mind, the sort of soul of magnanimity as a person. And I think it leaks through his comedy, which is never corrosive, even when it's quite sharply delivered. He just seems like a lovely human being. And Dua Lipa asked him during one of his shows when he was ostensibly interviewing her, she asked him about the relationship between his faith and his comedy. And whatever else is true about Colbert's faith, which I think he mostly, if not almost entirely, keeps to himself, but he's a serious, observant Catholic, raised Catholic, is that he functions as no one else's, or presumes to function as nobody else's conscience. And when he begins to describe what being a believer meant to him is profoundly serious and moving without being self-serious and without being at all hectoring. It's actually quite a beautiful meditation on the relationship between being a human being, which means you're a temporal creature. Your fallenness is defined by the fact that you enter time as no other thing does, with a consciousness of your mortality. And through faith, you establish a relationship on a minute-by-minute basis with eternity in some sense. And it seems to me there is a relationship between that structure of belief, whether or not you're, orthodox in any sense of the word, and that magnanimity, which comes through, I think, almost everything he says and does. So here, that is really worth watching.
And I think this is also a Catholic thing because it's funny and it's sad, and it's funny about being sad. In the same way that sadness is like a little bit of an emotional death, but not a defeat if you can find a way to laugh about it. Because that laughter keeps you from having fear of it. And fear is the thing that keeps you from turning to evil devices to save you from the sadness. As Robert
I saw that same clip in the process of reading about Colbert.
It's fantastic. Beautiful. I mean, he really, I think, certainly few voices at that level of prominence, really talks about faith as something that feels like a living thing that he is still, working out, maybe struggling with, but also clearly drawing sustenance from.
Yeah.
And it just never... He never feels like he's reading off a script. He never feels like he's just sort of spouting doctrine. It's very real to him. And I feel that maybe it is to a lot of people, but few people can talk about it as well as he does.
Yeah, there's a theological depth and maturity to it, which is what's so, among the things that's really stunning about that moment. Anyway, highly recommended. And very, very quickly, I really love piano jazz. I love trios led by pianists. Bill Evans being the god among gods, forever untouchable in that regard. But looking for that same high, you sort of turn to many of them, Fred Hirsch, Brad Mehldau, a lot of people. But I really was underfamiliar with the sadly now deceased, I think he died in a scuba or boating accident. Anyway, I'm sorry, I don't know. Esbjörn Svensson, the Swedish pianist, led a trio. Great place to start with him is Somewhere Else Before. It's a live record. He made it in Gothenburg, a city I know and love. He's an extraordinary player. He has that lyricism of Evans without being derivative of him in a completely contemporary context. He made really, really amazing music. And there's some intense YouTube videos of him with his trio. His bass player, will go on just 1 second more. He has an upright bass player it's one of those, you find this in jazz occasionally. Some trombonists, for example, like a slide instrument, it's very hard to articulate notes with a certain kind of precision as opposed to a fully valved instrument, much less one with keyholes. But some trombonists can do it. Similarly, this guy can bass solo. Bass solos are so obligatory. His are astonishing. He sounds much more it's articulated in a way that a guitarist might play a solo. Anyway, Esbjörn Svensson Trio. Somewhere Else Before is the live record. It's a great place to start. Dana, thank you so much.
It's a good show.
Yeah, it was very fun. Sam, as always, total pleasure. So glad you came in.
Thank you.
You'll find links to some of the things we talked about today at our show page. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. Our introductory music is by the composer Nicholas Bertel. Our production assistant is Daniel Hirsch. Our producer is Benjamin Frisch. For Dana Stevens and Sam Adams, I'm Stephen Metcalf. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.